Here we are at where Snowbird Road forks off into Big and Little Snowbird Roads. And on this episode, you will be taken far, but not all the way, down Little Snowbird Road. But before we do get to our destination, I need you to take a look at this photo. This photo here, it is of the Denton cabin. You see, the Denton family, the ones who built this cabin, are going to be discussed in more detail on this episode. You see, as we approach our destination, the site of yet another old Denton home place will be unearthed. Firstly, it does appear that Little Snowbird Road eventually it turns into a dirt road. But it is one that I have got to go up. At least, it does appear to be drivable. Regardless, I have got to do this. So, let's get this vehicle moving. This here, it is the intersection of Little Snowbird and Coal Denton roads. And at this intersection stands a site often listed as a community on many maps. I am not certain as to whether or not I will be able to show you much, however. You see, the area, it does appear to be on private property, so we'll just have to see. If this does become too risky, Google Earth may just have to do. Oh, but wait. It turns out I am able to show you a lot more than I thought I would. More on the reason why a little bit later. For starters, John Denton and his family were the only recorded white settlers to have lived in today's Joyce Kilmer Memorial Forest. In the 1800s, Denton lived on land owned by the Belding Lumber Company, and for decades prior, the Cherokees had occupied that area. Born in Georgia in 1840, John Denton, he grew up in Polk County, Tennessee, as the son of a school commissioner. And after serving in the Civil War, he married Albertine Turner. The couple, they had 9 children. 5 were born in Tennessee, and 4 were born in Santitas Forests here in North Carolina. In Benton, Tennessee, Denton worked as a jailer, and in 1879, Denton, he moved his family across the Unicoi Mountains and into Graham County, North Carolina. But questions do remain as to why. Was he forced to leave after a dispute gone awry at a local dance, as some have claimed? Or did he, as a Confederate veteran of the Civil War, find it difficult to resettle in his Tennessee home, still recovering a decade after the brother against brother conflict? Was John embittered by his imprisonment at the fall of Vicksburg in July of 1863, when he and others were pulled from caves dug into the banks of the Mississippi River? Oh, okay. So you're wondering where much of this info is even coming from. It's good that you asked. I should have said it earlier, I guess, but I forgot. So, most, but not all, of the information for this episode comes from an excerpt in this book, Nantahala National Forest, A History. And with that said, if John Denton did leave his boyhood home resentful and bitter, he certainly would have found peace and inspiration in the stately safe haven of the Little Santee-La Basin. John's mother-in-law, who was a cousin of Jefferson Davis, President of the Confederacy, was visiting Ohio relatives when the Dentons left Tennessee Reportedly, she returned to her home in Benton, heartbroken. But she had made her way home and on foot to Graham County, wrote David Denton, great grandson of John Denton and author of this book, The Denton Experience, Family and Friends, Faces and Places. Now, yes, I am not using excerpts from this book for this episode, though I imagine you can learn a lot more about this area if you ever do read it. John and Albertine Denton, they died in 1913. However, in 1893, John Denton's sons, Charles and Forrest, they moved from the Santitla area to become caretakers of a 1,000-acre farm in the little Snowbird community. And that, folks, is what takes us to what lies at this intersection, at the start of and along this here road, Cold Denton Road. And at the end of this road is where many gazetteers pinpoint the location of what has come to be referred to as Dentons. Now, that may be true, but it does appear to lie at this here, what I believe to be the start of Cold Denton Road. You know, though, it is said that after Charles and Forrest moved to that little Snowbird farm, John and the others, they followed. In a mid-1800s North Carolina land grant, Frederick Augustus Waldo from Cincinnati, Ohio, had acquired the little Snowbird property, and after the land passed to his son, Frank Waldo, of New Haven, Connecticut, in 1887, the land passed to his son. And so, the Dentons, they became the managers of the Waldo Cattle Ranch. According to Leota Wilcox, shown here at age 5, and later curator of the Denton Family Museum and great-granddaughter of John, Waldo paid the Dentons for their service in parcels of land. And over the years, Forrest Denton, he purchased more acreage from his neighbors. When Graham County seized adjoining lots for non-payments of taxes, he purchased that property also. A tidy, well-tended Denton museum now sits on the spot of an original Denton farm building, destroyed years ago in a storm. Wow. So, there is a Denton Family Museum. Yes, apparently there is. But guess what? Actually, I happened to meet Leota Wilcox, and she is the one who gave me permission to enter the Denton Family Museum. That is where the interior shots you have been seeing in this episode have been coming from. This here, it is a 2008 book, A History of Hunting in the Great Smoky Mountains. In it, more information on the Dentons can be found. In fact, it actually features a pic of this house, the original Forrest Denton home on Little Snowbird. It is now renovated and owned by John's great-nephew, Thomas Denton Wilcox, with now being a reference to 2008. Now it is 2022, so tell me, have you seen that house yet in this episode? This photo here shows, on the left, Baxter Cook, and on the right, Forrest Denton, holding bear cubs that reportedly were the pets of John Denton. A discussion about the Denton land, reportedly once called the Denton Family Preserve, would not be complete with at least mentioning the man shown to the left in this photo, Victor Denton. You see, a big part of who Vic Denton was and what he stood for was the magnificent Denton Family Preserve on Little Snowbird Creek. Today, over 700 acres of that land are still owned by the Denton family, who continued to proudly perpetuate the legacy of their ancestors on the last frontier of Graham County. And finally, you can read this one here at your own pace. Reportedly, John Denton, he had a reputation as a fighter. And that pretty much sums up the story of Dentons, a small little community that can only be reached via a remote and desolate dirt road in Graham County. Now we can move on to our next destination.